Hello, and thanks for watching the Voice of the People podcast here on KXNet.com. Well, today we're talking about how a meteorologist becomes as informed as possible to convey the most accurate information. And joining me is KX Storm Team member, meteorologist Stone Schaefer, and from the National Weather Service, the Warning Coordination meteorologist, John Paul Martin. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Nicholas, it's great to be with you. And Stone, good to be with you too, my friend. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again as well.
So here we are, the day after a lot of what we saw over the last week or so. We saw some snow movement here in our area. But before we get into that, I want to start with just talking about your backgrounds. John Paul, how did you get into the meteorological world?
Holy cow, Nicholas, that's an amazing question. Let me answer it this way. In all seriousness, I asked my mother one time years ago. I said, "When did I become interested in the weather?" I asked her that, and she said, "You never became interested. It was from day one." She said, "Almost the day you were born, you just were always interested in weather." I would, Nicholas, as a child, I would give weather briefings in my bedroom to my family. I would, when thunderstorms were coming in later in the day, I would take a nap in the summer in the afternoon, get up and stay up all night long recording the weather when it came in. So it's always been a passion, and it's amazing to be paid to do something that you really enjoy in life.
Stone, how about you?
Yeah, it's a really similar story. I was probably in kindergarten, first grade. I always loved weather, and I think my parents knew that, so they started trying to get me into stuff, reading books about weather. And since like that first, second grade, I knew I wanted to be a meteorologist, and then obviously for school for it, and now we're here.
Right, now we are here, and so obviously a lot of training, a lot of experience. John Paul, how long have you been a meteorologist now?
March 12th was 34 years with the National Weather Service, 34 years of service.
Okay, and it's no, just a little bit less than that so far, right?
Yeah, I've been here at KX. I graduated May 2021. I've been here at KX for about a year, almost 2 years now.
Certainly, and of course, depending upon your varying levels and the amount of schooling and experience, you still got to be as prepared as possible for something like, what we were looking at, or what you both were looking at, and your colleagues for the last week or so. So let's talk about that. So obviously, at least in the Bismarck area, we didn't get hit with as much snow as we thought we might. Who wants to kind of break it down as to why we saw what we actually did see?
Well, Stone, maybe if it's okay with you, I'd start off. And Nicholas, we were impacted this past weekend by what's called a Colorado low, a low pressure that redevelops over the east side of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And typically they move northeast out of Colorado toward North Dakota. And we expected this one to do the same thing. But number one, it was weaker than we expected it to be. And number two, the track was not to the northeast toward North Dakota. It was pretty much east across the state of Kansas. So it kept us on the northern fringe of the storm. Now that storm today is moving up through towards Iowa and into Wisconsin later on. And so again, now we're going to be on the western fringe instead of right in the bullseye.
Anything you want to add, Stone?
Yeah, no, that's yeah, that sounds about right. That system moved pretty east after we expected all week that it would take some kind of northeast track, and it just didn't. And yeah, that's why we sort of stayed on that north sort of edge of it.
And I know there will be some people, or there are some people out there that say, "Well, how did you miss that?"
Yeah, listen, we're hearing a lot of the we're hearing from a lot of those people. Let me just tell you, Nicholas, we're hearing from a lot of those people the past 24 hours or so, and some of it, let's just be honest. It's kind of one of my flaws. I'm painfully honest, I'm told sometimes. And look, in a lot of ways, we did not do a good job in forecasting the storm. Uh, Amounts, for example, in Bismarck, a little over 3 inches. We've had reports as much as 5 or 6, Bismarck Mandan area, and we were forecasting basically 6 to 12. So we got less than half of the amount we forecast. Worked out a little better out toward Dickinson and up along the Canadian border, where amounts were pretty much what we had forecast. But again, let's be honest and say we missed it for a lot of parts of North Dakota. But some of the feedback has been just it's been kind of nasty. And so, we appreciate the feedback. We admit, hey, could have done a better job for the people. We did the best we could based on the information we had, but in hindsight, you say, hey, you could have tried to do a little better. Just that the some of the words used in emails and social media leave a little bit to be desired.
But at the same time now, and Stone, I'll throw this one to you. You weren't here at the time, but obviously that Easter time snowstorm we had 2 years ago when we just got hammered. Would you rather overestimate and then experience like what we did this weekend, or would you rather say kind of shoot on the lower end and then what would you as a professional rather do?
Well, for us at least, we tend to try to overshoot it maybe a little bit, not by much, nothing extreme. Some of these social media posts even beforehand we had to play off of it because they were showing 50 plus inches, which is just absurd. But we like to tend to shoot a little bit higher just because I'd rather people be prepared and play it safe than we say, oh, it's going to be this very small number and we do get hit and then people are not prepared. So I think that's the big thing that people just sometimes don't really realize is it's not always about getting the numbers right. It's just keeping people safe, getting that word out that things could get bad. And roads are bad. We had lots of reports of accidents, more than maybe I was expecting when I seen a lot of pictures of cars off the roads because the roads got slick once that wind started picking up, that snow, even the lowest amounts can cause that ice, can cause the reduced visibility. So sometimes it's more, again, me and the KX Storm team towards Saturday was more of let's take the approach of safety first. Let's not talk about a number. Let's not give a certain number, but more of how can we prepare people for the roads to be very slick and visibilities to be very reduced.
And John Paul, we talked about it just a moment ago about social media. Of course, everybody has, or most people have access to social media, and so they see something like a 50-inch snow prediction, and people will go, "Whoa, is this the big one?" But then again, sometimes people aren't necessarily sure, and this kind of gets into the whole thing of people getting scammed, they're misinformation, a whole slew of things. So, how do people know without turning to the experts like you and Stone what they're seeing is actually accurate?
Nicholas, it's a great question. It's a huge challenge for us, and it's a challenge that's actually getting stronger. It's more of a challenge with almost every passing day. So what we like to say is have a reliable source of weather information. And look, if that's we sure hope the National Weather Service is near the top of that list of who folks consider to be reliable, and then stick with that source. Hey, if you say Stone Schaefer is my reliable source, then listen, stick with him through thick and thin. Just stay with him. It's a problem today. Social media, anybody can post anything on social media, and the graphics that are posted that showed the 53 inches of snow at Williston, well, that was from one of the computer model runs that put out that forecast of 53 inches. But again, it was one forecast from one run of a model. It's not responsible to take that and then post it on social media. And here's the thing I don't get. Nicholas, if tomorrow, if you own a stock in a company and tomorrow somebody posts on social media that stock is going to zero, right? They're going bankrupt. Are you going to run out and sell all your stock in that company based on that social media post? Now, if it's a reliable person, an economic expert, a stock market expert, well, you might sell it, but not just for any post. But yet with weather, no matter what anybody posts, people just kind of fall right for it, and I can't figure that one out.
Well, I was going to say, if that happens, you might be looking at some insider trading, but that's another story for a completely different day. So again, not as much snowfall, and I want to go back to forecasting. And I mean, like I said, we refer to you both as meteorologists, but really you're forecasting. But I think myself included, sometimes you're forecasting something that can change on a moment's notice. So, how often and how well do you think even yourselves take that into account, that you're dealing with something, you're dealing literally with Mother Nature that you have no control over?
Yeah, well, the forecasting has changed tremendously especially over the most recent years. So we used to have a handful of models that we would run, and then you'd look at these models and hope they agree, right? And then you'd have more confidence in the outcome in the forecast. Today, what we're doing is so today you have not only a variety of models, but you tweak that each of those models. So for example, you start with the current conditions, you run the model, you get the result. Okay, now raise the temperature a degree, run the model and get the result. Lower the temperature, increase the pressure, decrease the pressure, change the wind a little bit. And what you're looking for is to see no matter what I do to the initial conditions in the model, the outcome is the same. And when it is, and let me just tell you, it's never the same. But when it's close, you say, well, I have more confidence, right? No matter what I do to the model, the outcome is the same. Of course, they're not all the same. But what there are in say 100 runs of a model, there are clusters. So there's solutions that are kind of in clusters, and then we look at those clusters to say, well, 10% show this, 40% show that, right? And then the other 50% shows something else. So you play the odds, right? You go with the majority. So you say, well, I'm going to go with that group that shows this 50% of the models are showing a similar outcome. That's the one I'm going to go with. You kind of play the odds. So a lot's going into it, but any little change, typically, 2, 3, 4 days out and beyond, results in significant differences in what the model is expecting for the result to be.
Sure. And Stone, you mentioned this morning how big of a factor the drier air was.
Yeah, that it really, because the models maybe struggled a bit with that detecting of that dry air, which again has happened in the past. And again, when it comes to just that forecasting, it's just definitely looking at stuff like that as well. Maybe sometimes we just forget about those little things, because there's a bunch of different factors that obviously go into these models. And if we miss one little thing and while looking at the model, or just don't think about it because it's not on our mind, or maybe it's not as influential as we think it's going to be, that can change a lot of things. And I know Thursday we started getting a hint of it last week that, hey, this high pressure to the north is going to have some influence, but again, it just maybe wasn't our top priority, and then it became more of a priority when we got to the weekend and this system started doing really what it was showing.
And I want to sit with you, Stone, here for just a second, because like you said, you're a much younger meteorologist than JP is. But even so, you've been through school, you've been through training. So, and of course now you're you're here in North Dakota. I mean, I know you're from Michigan and you're kind of familiar with that weather, but even with your training, how does something like this set you up for learning now what we could see potentially here in North Dakota?
Man, that's a just the experience. I think would be the big thing. Is just now, now I know. Okay, let me next time we have a winter event, next time we have some kind of event, it's just taking that extra step and looking at some of those extra variables that we could see that could influence a huge portion of the storm. Maybe it's something like in the summer where we have the cap form, and it maybe just the storm doesn't break through the cap, or like that, the dry air in the winter just sort of wins that battle. Just maybe. When we miss something like this, or even when we get something right, it's just looking at those variables that don't always come into play, but maybe we should look at it more. And it's something that obviously I think we're all trying to strive to do.
And John Paul, as far as your experience, when you look at something like we saw, earlier last week and over the weekend, with your experience now, what is something that you've fine tuned in as far as what you look at ahead over your years of experience when it comes to snowfall?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure there's anything we're going to do differently as far as what we look at in preparation for a storm forecasting the weather, because no two storms, just like no two people, are identical. You'd have to have exactly the same everything associated with a storm for it to give the same outcome, and never is it that way. One thing we're trying to work on hard though is, and we had a meeting last Thursday, I think it was, Stone, with our broadcast meteorologist partners to kind of talk about, well, here's how we're going to start messaging the storm. How are you doing it? So that we're kind of on the same page. So that if somebody goes to KX, somebody goes to the National Weather Service, they're getting a similar message. And then, of course, people, when they get similar messages, they have more confidence in that message. Now, in this case, of course, the confidence was fairly high, and the storm did not pan out exactly as we thought. But that, I guess, that's the way it goes sometimes, unfortunately.
And when growing up, I remember vividly watching the news and always thinking, whenever they issued a little statement from the National Weather Service, you thought, "Oh boy, this is pretty serious stuff." So why would that be a perception on one of our viewers? Would you say?
Hmm.
Is it because it's just that
Yeah,
national
I think
sort of?
I think yeah, the National Weather Service, the people that you see that and you know what it means and you know what work they put in. You know, there's always people, you know, always looking at that weather at the National Weather Service. So if you know weather, you know National Weather Service. So I think that's why when you see that, it means a lot.
Sure, but and obviously there you guys KX and the National Weather Service are two separate entities, but you're always working together to make sure as many people stay as safe as possible.
Yeah, especially you know the KX Storm Team. We're always looking at what the National Weather Service has to say. I always say it's always better to have more minds on, especially when it comes to forecasting. You know, that's another voice we have. You know, me, Kenny, and Hunter. We can look to the National Weather Service and hey, here's another voice. They're having opinions. Maybe it's a little different than ours. Maybe we're seeing something. They're seeing something that we're not. Maybe we're missing something, or maybe we think they're missing something. So it's a good resource for us here and for anyone in the National Weather Service just to use that and get your sort of melt our forecasts in a way that you know can be a similar image as well. And we do disagree. I know Thursday there might have been some snow total disagreements, but even they were pretty close, pretty similar at the end of the day.
And obviously, when we get into spring weather, we're talking about more severe stuff, and then you get into tools available like weather balloons.
Oh, sure. Yeah, weather balloons. I think this kind of goes to your previous question about the National Weather Service, is because the National Weather Service, a federal government agency, we collect all the data that's used, right? We take surface observations. We release weather balloons twice a day. We own and operate the radars. We own and operate satellites, and all this data, all this information, because it's collected with taxpayer dollars, we have to make it free to anybody who wants to use it. So private companies get this data from the National Weather Service. Now they add value to it, right? They add color and they add animation and so on that the National Weather Service does not do. Private companies do that. They add value to it. They put it in a way people, the average person, can understand it. And so I think that's why people think National Weather Service is kind of this official, and it is the official sole voice of official warnings from the federal government comes through the National Weather Service. And I guess if I could say one other thing is, we don't look at competition. We don't look at your team at KX meteorologists. We don't look at that as competition. We look at it as a partnership, because we have the same goal in mind, right? Protect life and property. We want people to do the right thing. We want people to be prepared. And so we just love it when KX meteorologists take the National Weather Service message and force multiply it, put it out there. And again, we had a meeting with the team last Thursday, I think it was, and we're trying to do more of that, even to discuss the science. Hey, is there something you see in this guidance that we miss? And how are you going to message it? Because that could help us to better message it too.
And you talked about data in stone. I'll toss this one to you because you deal with this more than JP typically does on a day-to-day basis. Is interrupting programming and calls with weather. I know it's not everybody's ball game viewership at home, but like I said, it's not necessarily a matter of being a distraction. It's being a source of information to let people know, what's potentially headed their way.
Yeah, we use it. It's a great resource to get the message out. Sometimes this weekend we learned while the ticker got put up, our weather ticker got put up, without us knowing. We're going to try to run the bug, be a little less invasive for March Madness running, but it is a great tool, especially during those summer severe weather events. It will tell you location, it will tell you time, it will tell you when it will get to your location. It will tell you a lot of information. It might be annoying, might block your March Madness scoreboard, but sometimes it is very much needed to get that message out, because sometimes we just can't get it out quick enough, and that could be the first thing people see to get the what's the word I'm looking for here? Just to have that knowledge of what is heading their way.
Because again, like we said earlier, I would suspect you would be rather more cautious than say, hey, how come you guys didn't put this out there, right, JP?
Right. I think that's true, because we'll hear about it if something, if we have some information, right, and it's not getting out to the public, we're going to hear that's a no-no, right? We don't want anybody to think we're holding information back. We want it out there because we need people to make the right decisions, whatever that is for them, and to be prepared, as I mentioned earlier. And if you over prepared for the storm, you bought a few extra supplies and all. Well, now you don't have to buy supplies, for a few days or for a week more. Maybe no harm, no foul. Now, if you changed your plans, and we did have some calls about that, folks saying, "Look, I changed my plans for the weekend." And again, based on the information we had at the time, that was the right decision. Now, in the end, when you look back and what was reality, you say, well, I guess it wasn't. But again, at the time, with the information we had, that was a good decision to say, hey, there's going to be 6 to 12 inches of snow. I probably shouldn't make that trip to wherever I had planned to be going.
And actually, I'll go off of that too. Is that sometimes when people look at the weather, I've noticed too, a lot of viewers, a lot of people just look, they take it from an individual eyes look, and you think of yourself, but you got to think maybe your neighbor's not the best driver in the snow, or maybe they're just something happens, and we would rather be over prepared for those people that maybe aren't ready than just for yourself. It's a broader view than just solo individuals. So yeah, when people are like, "Well, I cancel my plans," well, thank you for staying safe. We're pushing this message because we don't know everyone. No one's the same. We all have different. We have people here at KX News who are new. They've never been in snow, so they were nervous. And we've been lucky this winter that some of them were started before the winter, and they haven't seen much snow. And now we get this event and start getting nervous. How am I going to get to work? So again, I think it goes back to being. Get the message out there so people are prepared. So if it doesn't hit, okay, that's fine. We're all safe here at the end of the day.
You touched on that some, but when you both were looking at the forecast, how much of it do you take into consideration as you mentioned, some of our colleagues here have never been in a big snowstorm. How much of a factor do you take into consideration, compared to when you compare it to say like, oh yeah, that big Easter time snowstorm 2 years ago? Is that something you kind of try to put in perspective for folks saying, well, we may not be like this, but it's still going to be pretty severe? Tell me about that.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Okay.
And and the timing of these things, it depends on the timing. For example, around Christmas time, we know it's a big travel time, right? So we don't, the National Weather Service, we try not to stick to these firm thresholds of, well, this triggers a warning and that does not, right? Because if there's high impact to society, whether it meets the definition of a warning or not, I'm going to relax the rules and issue the warning, for folks. We have big tournaments going on or something like that across the state, because we need that message to get out. Now, we're not going to purposely over forecast the weather, but we may use certain terms that we wouldn't in that situation. But the situation, whatever's going on at the time, kind of dictates that we use those other terms, warnings versus advisory and things like that. So it certainly does. It certainly does come into our mind and plays a role in those decisions. For example, let me give you this one. In the summertime, look, the county fair is going on, right? Mm-hmm. The county fair is going on somewhere, and the thunderstorm is going to produce a nickel-size hail and 50-mile-an-hour wind at the fairgrounds. Okay, by definition, that does not meet a severe thunderstorm warning. But boy, I'm going to be thinking maybe I'm just going to issue that warning anyway so that those people know they need to get to shelter, because 50-mile-an-hour and nickel-size hail is going to wreak havoc at the fairgrounds. So I may trigger that, post that warning when technically it doesn't meet the definition, but I'm okay with that as long as the folks took action and they're safe.
Don't have much,
I mean, yeah, I don't really have much to say about that. I mean, for us, it's always about, at the end of the day, it's about protecting the people. It's about getting that message out. And if it's one person that can be prepared, that's one person, that is our job. Our job is to inform the public of what the weather is going to be like. It's another asset of getting that preparation, whether it be storm or snow or hail or maybe a tornado in the summer. Just people being prepared for what could suddenly change their lives.
So, and speaking of that, and we'll kind of get towards the end here. So, summarizing all of this, whether it's snow, whether it's severe thunderstorms, as you said, John Paul, if you can put a number on how much of a responsibility do viewers or watchers or listeners have on being themselves informed versus how much you do the informing?
Well, that's a good question. Ultimately, it's an individual responsibility. You're either going to believe what you're hearing from the Weather Service or from KX, or you're not. And you're either going to take action based on that or you're not. Know this, my family also, we changed our plans for the weekend. And in hindsight, didn't really need to do that. But again, it's not like I had any insider information on the forecast. I was also a victim of the science of meteorology not being 100%. So ultimately, it's a personal decision. We're just here trying to help you with those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, our job, in again, it goes back to our job. It is not to make your decision. We are just here to hopefully maybe lead you in a direction to keep you safe, or lead you in a direction that, you know what, I don't think this is right. I'm going to go my own route. And we're going to see people that, again, there will be people that we have that say, thank you, I stayed home, I didn't get, I stayed safe. And there's going to be people that probably went out on the road and they're regretting that, especially with this snow and all the ice. But again, it is you have whatever right you want to believe what you want to believe in, and we're just here to try to maybe persuade you to stay safer, or maybe just take a different direction when it comes to these weather events.
So
You know,
final,
Stone,
sorry, go ahead.
can I? Yeah, Stone, I was just going to say, Nicholas, that Stone, I'm sure you've had some of these calls too, where, we'll get a call and somebody will say, hey, I'm going to Fargo tomorrow. You're forecasting that snow. Should I go? Well, look, I can't answer that for you, right? I can give you the weather forecast. I can tell you what time the snow is going to start, how much you're going to get along the way, how much Fargo is going to get, and all this kind of thing. But ultimately, it's your decision as to whether or not that you go.
Yeah, and I actually just on Friday was out at the grocery store and had a lady come up to me who was like, I have plans Monday. Should I cancel them? And I told I said, I I can't make that decision for you. We're gonna have the snow. Blowing snow may not be as much as we were originally predicting, but it still could be hazardous to your plans.
And John Paul, I think you hit the nail on the head. You said the science, and of course, like we said earlier, it's not going to always be 100%. Well, I mean, the weather's not in your control. I mean, that's just the bottom line. But all you guys can do is look at the science, look at the data, and be as cautious and be as straightforward as possible with everybody.
Yeah, that's for sure. And again, just know that we're doing the best that we can. Most of the time, I'd say we're doing a pretty darn good job. There are those failures like this weekend. Some folks might say, "Well, you kind of failed me this weekend," and I want to be the first to say I'm going to stand up and say, "Yeah, I agree. I agree. The forecast was overdone in most of the state of North Dakota, not the whole state, but most of it." And you kind of say sorry about that, and we hope to not allow that to happen again. But know inevitably there's going to be misses even in the future. The science of meteorology is what it is.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk about how you do your job, how well you do it. As you said, it's not perfect, but all you can do is look at the data, rely on your experience, and try to keep people as informed as possible. So, John Paul Martin, Stone Schaefer, thank you so much again for all you do here for North Dakota, and of course, thank you for watching the Voice of the People podcast. We'll be back with more questions and answers affecting you, because remember, it's your voice that matters, the voice of the people.